Hey guys, and welcome to Pheas Airsoft, where today I'm going to talk you through the anatomy of a version 2 gearbox. Okay guys, so welcome back. If you are enjoying my content, please do consider liking and subscribing. It really does help me out. So today I've got the version 2 gearbox from my CM506 M4CQB, little great budget piece. If you see my other stuff about this, you'll see the review and the gate installation. Absolutely fantastic piece of kit, absolute bargain price. What I wanted to do is just talk people around a version 2 gearbox. So this has been taken out of an M4, also found inside of most M4 variants, MP5s as well, and G3s as well. So quite a versatile gearbox used in quite a few different Airsoft AEGs. So we'll start on the outside. We've got the selector plate on this side, and this little bit here interfaces with your fire selector, and that moves it around. Now sometimes these are all plastic with no copper strip, sometimes they're metal. There's various different ones, and they will look slightly different on an MP5 and a G3. They use a different selector plate. So what happens is, as this is pushed all the way forward, this pushes on this little bracket here, and that lifts a pin up that we'll see inside that holds against the trigger and stops you pulling the trigger, and that's how the safety works. As you engage single shot, the electrical connection is made by touching those two pins together, and we have a cut-off in here which we'll see in a few minutes, and that taps against a gear, and once the gear has completed a revolution, single shot, it lifts the trigger block basically and stops you firing. It cuts the gearbox off. As you move on to full auto, it disengages that little cut-off lever just by pushing it up out of the way, and the contact with the gear comes out of the way. That way then you hold the trigger down and it'll just spin and spin and spin and spin until you let go of the trigger, and that's how full auto is engaged. So inside here we can see part of the spring that I can compress a little bit. We've also got a plastic spring guide in here. This bit is our cylinder, and inside there is the piston. We've got our air nozzle at the front, made out of plastic on this occasion, and these little metal hoops here are known as bushings. So these basically sit in the gearbox and have the gears locked into them, and help the gears spin a little bit more freely. These can also be bearing based, which some people argue against, some people are totally for. I'm a bit undecided. On the ones that have got them, I've not noticed any issues. The ones that don't have them, I've also not noticed any real difference. But that is something that you can find in different gearboxes. So we're going to open this up and we're going to have a look inside this gearbox. Now on this one, they have used Phillips head screws, which is most commonly used to keep a gearbox together. You will occasionally find that they are Torx head screws, and sometimes for some reason mixed. You'll get some Phillips and some Torx. Not entirely sure why that was a choice for some companies, but there you go. So I always start by removing the top ones, and then I'll remove the bottom ones. Now the top ones are all tiny little stubby screws. As you're removing them from the lower body, sometimes it's worth noting that there may be different lengths, and it's worth putting them in the correct order that you took them out, so you know which screw went where. So I think most of these are the same, apart from this little screw here is different, so I've got to be careful of that, although I don't think that's actually keeping the gearbox closed. Might be actually. I'll have a look at that in a moment. So I'm just going to unscrew that. I'm going to remove that because it does look like it is actually not entirely, but sort of keeping the gearbox shut. So I'll just remove it just in case. Putting the screws in the right order. Now we're ready to pop this open. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a screwdriver, a little thin one, I'm going to push it in here. So this goes into the back of the spring guide. So if I move that, you can see the movement inside a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to angle this up towards me so it forces that down. So if I don't do this and I split the gearbox, then what happens generally, once I get that bit, is this spring guide and spring would go ping straight out the back of the gearbox across your living room, probably break something, and then whoever you live with probably wouldn't be very happy. So inside here then we've got the spring guide. This one's plastic in here, usually metal, and usually have a bearing around the bottom because the springs, as they compress, they want to twist. Keeps the springs healthy. So that's the spring guide. There's your spring. Now that's a cheap spring that you would normally get in a cheap gun like this, and a normal AEG would have what we call a non-linear spring. So it would have a tight coil section of coils at the end, it would have a tight section in the middle, and then it would probably be a little bit longer, and the rest would look like that. Why they're like that, I'm not entirely sure. If you do know, please do comment below for me. So next we've got the trigger is here, and the little safety. So as the safety selector moves into the safe position, that moves up, stopping you moving your trigger. Your trigger is on a little spring as well. So we've then got the cylinder and cylinder head and air nozzle. So I'll just lift those out. We've also got, attached to this assembly, is this piece here is known as the Tappet Plate. So this gear, as it moves around, which is the sector gear, it pulls this back, which is spring loaded, and allows a BB in, and then that comes back forward, and then the piston will fire back because this gear also pulls the piston back, and the BB is fired out the front. Now a good way to check your compression on these is if you remove the air nozzle and the Tappet Plate, and if you put your finger over the end of there's the piston head on the piston. If I push that in, now that's not got a very good air seal because I can push the piston all the way in with pretty much no real pressure at all. So it is only doing about 320 out of the box, which based on the strength of that spring, the spring's stronger, so it's compensating for a weaker air seal. If you want to check it further than that, put the air nozzle on and you can check it again. Obviously I already know the air seal's bad in there, so it's not going to be any better on there. Now ideally, if you've got good air seal, you should only get the piston moving so far before it just locks up with pressure where you can't force the air out because your finger's keeping it in. So that's that part. Next we've got 3 gears. So we've got here the spur gear that sits against the motor. So the motor's got a little gear on the head. There we go, look. So that little gear is the pinion gear, and that links into, I'll lift that out carefully, the underside of this gear. So it's got teeth there, and that spins, the motor spins that gear. This little thing here is called the anti-reversal latch, and that stops the gear set from winding backwards when you've let go of the trigger, which is quite an important feature within the gearbox. This one is the sector gear, and you can get dual sector gears which have not quite as many teeth around the outside, but they have 2 sets of teeth and 2 of these notches to pull the Tappet Plate back. Basically this one's job is to pull the Tappet Plate back to allow BBs to feed, and it pulls the piston back as well using these teeth. And then last but not least, the one in the middle here is the Bevel Gear, and that interacts between the spur gear and the sector gear and completes the set. Here we've got the cut-off lever, which will, as the gearbox spinning, if it's in single shot, just make sure that's in the right position. It is. If it's in single shot, this bit here will push against this little tier shape underneath the gear, and that will lift this little trigger so it pops back into place, cuts the gearbox off. As it goes into full auto mode, push that back, it completely removes it from the gear so the gear can spin freely until you let go of the trigger. get them back together. So that all in all is pretty much a whistle-stop tour of the inside of a version 2 gearbox. They're not as scary as people may have you think. They can be, you know, a little bit tricky to work on at times, but that gives you a good indication of what they're like. This one has got an excessive amount of grease in here. It looks like 2 different kinds of grease, but works pretty well. Obviously, for the price tag that I bought it for, like £59, you can't really argue an awful lot. So I hope this has been useful to you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.